We have several more NHL signings to discuss, plus Team USA has unveiled who their management team will be for the 2022 Olympics. We'll jump into the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have several more signings that has taken place here since the video we put out earlier today. Of course, we talked about some prospects getting contracts and some of the other prospects we thought might be signing soon, and a bunch of those guys have signed and some other ones as well. Now, before we jump into those, we do have news from USA Hockey today. John Van Beesbroek announcing the GM for Team USA for the 2022 Olympic team will be Chicago Blackhawks GM Stan Bowman, and his assistant GM will be Bill Garrett. Now, they'll likely add more bodies to that management crew as time goes on, but Stan Bowman has been pegged to lead that team to the international competition here. Obviously, we already know a lot about Team Canada's brass as well. So obviously, that's a really good opportunity for those guys. I mean, we'll see what they do here. Obviously, it's going to add a lot of extra duties to things here as we get closer. Now, they did also announce, and I assume Team Canada and other countries have subsequent plans as well, but if for some reason the NHL doesn't end up going to the Olympics, that they'll likely be removed and have other guys take over because they're mainly going because they're NHL people, obviously. So they'll kind of go with a change of plans in that case. But right now, things are supposed to be that the NHL is going, but there still are a few more details to be ironed out and things before they're finalized. So you just never know until an official deal is in place. Now, all of our signings we're talking about here today are not all prospects. We actually had the Vancouver Canucks announce an extension for goalie Thatcher Demko, who is going to be a pending restricted free agent. They got this deal done a little bit early. There was some rumblings in the last day or so that conversations were taking place on a contract, and they were hoping to have it done a little bit soon. Obviously, they still have Quinn Hughes and Elise Pettersson to do, which are going to be much more substantial, and they even have to do a contract for head coach Travis Green, who's been working on the final year of his deal, and a lot of questions remain, assuming he'll be back. But you have to wonder, will they get a deal done and extend him, or what are the Canucks going to do? Because that obviously is another big part of it as well. I know all the comments from Canucks. I know all the comments from the Canucks organization lead us to think that Green is still, in good terms with them, and they still see him as being their coach for the foreseeable future here. So we'll have to see what they do. But Thatcher Demko, his contract is 5 years at $5 million per year. So 5 times 5 for Demko. Now, it's crazy to think he's actually only played 62 regular season games, but obviously he hasn't really had much of an opportunity to be a starter. I mean, this year coming into the season, we didn't know between him and Holtby how things were going to go, but certainly fair to say Demko's kind of taken over here. He showed that, Bubble Demko, as he was known as back in last summer's return to play in the Toronto Edmonton Bubbles and during the playoffs, that was no fluke, that he's the real deal, and he continued to play well this year. He's had another solid season. Of course, he would have been a UFA in 2 years' time, so this buys up 3 of his unrestricted free agent years. So looking at what they just ended up giving to Markstrom in Calgary, who obviously was Vancouver's all-star goaltender for quite some time, he got $6 million, and other contracts are going to be running the same term here. So, would you rather have Demko at a little bit less during his prime years, or have Markstrom with the same kind of money, slightly more money actually, with the same kind of term is what I meant to say, but obviously well into his 30s? I think most Canuck fans would take Demko. The other thing, too, is the Markstrom camp was really pushing Vancouver to include a no move or a form of a no trade, and they didn't want to do that. They were really looking for the no move, especially for the first little while, to kind of force them to protect him during the expansion draft. And obviously, they would have lost Demko for sure. But now that Demko is locked up here, that works out for the best, I think, for Vancouver long term. Obviously, I would suspect that Braden Holtby likely won't stick around too long. I would think Vancouver will likely try to move on from him. He's been okay, but at over $4 million a year, once Demko's contract kicks in, that would be over $9 million plus in goaltending next year if Holtby was not moved, because he still has another year in his deal. So I would think that Holtby could be explored to be a trade candidate here at the deadline. If not, sometime during the offseason, I would think that they'll find a way to move on from him and go with a less expensive backup for next year if they're able to. That could be Michael DiPietro, or there could be some other veteran guys they could bring in on a short-term cheap contract while they're waiting and giving more time for DiPietro to continue. But overall, I think it's a pretty good contract for Demko. For the most part, I like it. There is some risk involved just because of the, somewhat smaller sample size, but I guess if you've seen enough this year in between the bubble as well, then you believe in Demko, then this is a good deal. But looking around the NHL and some goalies that are making more money than him, that he's performed better than, you got to say this is, for the most part, a good contract. It's just a little risk because of the lack of bigger sample size. But overall, good deal there. And we'll see what else the Canucks work on the rest of their core that needs to get locked up as well. Now, we also had some more signings for some other college players that were high draft picks that we talked about before. We saw Matthew Boldy come out of college from Boston College and sign with Minnesota. And when we talked about that, I had mentioned a couple of his teammates that were high draft picks as well and wondering if they were going to be doing the same. And we've got both of them locked up now. Spencer Knight, first overall pick from a few years ago at the Florida Panthers, has signed his 3-year entry-level contract, leaving BC to go to the Panthers organization. You have to think this is going to impact Chris Driedger. They got Bobrovsky in that mega long-term big money deal. He's not going anywheres. And obviously with Knight coming in, you would think that with Driedger being a pending UFA and obviously has earned himself a pretty significant raise. I mean, I'm not sure what he'll get for a contract from wherever he ends up. But Driedger has been a bit of a renaissance this year and has really been a remarkable story. So somebody's going to give him an opportunity and give him a decent amount of cash, and the Panthers just can't do that. So will he be traded by the deadline? I know there's going to be interest. I guarantee the Panthers are going to get phone calls for sure. But, do they want him for the playoffs? I guess that's the big question here. Do they want to let him walk in the summertime or trade his rights for late round pick or something like that? I don't know. I mean, they would get more of a haul if they traded him sooner than later, but you have to think that he doesn't really fit into their future plans now, unless he was willing to agree to like a 1-year deal or something. But then you think he's going to be a high risk to be taken by Seattle in the expansion draft. So really, they can't sign him because they'll lose him to Seattle. And at the same time, they got Knight coming in, they got Bobrovsky. It's just, it's a good problem to have in a way, but they're going to end up losing Driedger one way or another. So I would suspect that a trade is probably more likely, but we'll have to see what the Panthers do. Now, the other Boston College teammate of these guys that came out of college here to sign with their NHL club is Alex Newhook, going to the Colorado Avalanche. Of course, it was another first-round pick who also had a really solid run there at Boston College. He's another exciting young player to add to an Avalanche team that's already pretty deep, pretty offensive, and pretty exciting already. So they have a lot of great young talent there. Just one more ingredient into the mix here to see what they can cook up for a long run as being a powerhouse at the NHL. But Newhook also signs his 3-year entry-level contract with the Avalanche, and those deals will kick in next year. The Tampa Bay Lightning have signed Odin Tufto, who was a college free agent. The 24-year-old forward who's been playing for Quinnipiac. He put up 168 points in 139 career college games. So obviously he's coming out as a 24-year-old. He gets a 1-year deal with Tampa, so that'll kick in next year. But on the short term here, he's signed an amateur tryout contract so he can play with their American Hockey League team in Syracuse for this season and then go into next year on his ELC. And we still don't have any news on the Ottawa Senators guys from University of North Dakota. We're still waiting word on that, but I would think between tonight or tomorrow, there should be some updates between Jacob Bernard-Docker, Shane Pinto, and Jake Sanderson. We still don't have anything from the Sens organization, but we do know that conversations were taking place, and at the very least, I would think Bernard-Docker and Pinto are likely signed to come out of college. I mean, a couple of weeks back, there was reports that Bernard-Docker definitely was going to, and the reports were indicating that Pinto was very, very likely to. Sanderson, where he's only got 1 year in, was just a 2020 draft pick, very well could go back for another year. That wouldn't be too shocking, but many feel he is also NHL ready, so it could kind of go either way, whichever way it ends up, it's not going to be a huge shock or surprise. They either get all three or 2 out of 3 under contract, which is pretty likely, but we're still waiting on word from those guys, so hopefully we'll have update for Sens fans here, like I said, if not tonight, then maybe sometime tomorrow. That is all your news for now. We'll be back a little bit later with some trade rumor rundown, so stay tuned for that. Let me know your thoughts on all these contracts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notification so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.